the Russian attack in Ulchadatina has been crushed. But is this the end of Russia's offensive plans, or are they building an army to open up an entirely new front? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. So this is a look at the front lines, and as you can see, there is virtually no change from yesterday. You can see, of course, I maintain that the Ukrainian forces probably going to conduct a withdrawal from Arkhangelsk. This looks like somewhat higher ground here, but there's just no reason for them to fight with their backs to it. So again, I think there's a withdrawal plan in place for the next, 24 or 48 hours. I don't think that's indicative of some sort of stunning Russian advance or whatever. I think that it is just part of a Ukrainian plan that sort of reflects Syrskyi's more flexible defensive strategy, or more flexible defensive doctrine, in which yielding bad territory, especially when there's much better territory to defend close by, is always worth the trade-off. The only changes that we do have to the front line, and there's a number, Russian forces making an incredibly marginal advance, taking this tree line here. It looks like about maybe 300 feet of tree line. We also have Russian forces seizing a town in the northern front here, which is unusual. It's unusual for any town to change hands. But this looks like, the last kind of redoubt of Ukrainian forces here, kicked out of this Kaisilivka, giving this two-town sort of cluster here to Russian forces. But again, given that you can see there's really very limited kind of roadways in this area, and the dense forest and rough terrain and low concentration of troops means that I never put much stock in these kind of back and forths, right? It's hard enough for Russia to stage offensive operations when they have favorable terrain to mounted armored forces. When it's unfavorable, as it often is here in the northern front, it is just unfeasible. It is just not going to happen for them. And so whatever they achieve, again, is often very limited. Oftentimes the gains are quickly reversed. There's not a lot of sustainability to it, right? And a lot of these units are just more lightly manned, even though it looks like a lot, right? We've seen based on sort of kind of inferred from Ukrainian data, this is just lighter units, a lower concentration of troops, and it takes a lot less to sort of shift to the front line back and forth versus where you have whole battalions or regiments engaged in just a few square miles of fighting. But there's a few more shifts in the front line. Let's see if we can tease it out here. Notably, there you go, a little bit of a change here near Povo-Mayeski. Again, a small Russian advance in a tree line. This looks a lot more like the Russian tactics we've seen over the past several months. And what I mean by that is that Russia is going back to what the Soviet doctrine says they should do. And Soviet doctrine, again, is about pressing across an entire front, right? Pushing the whole of your enemy's military without having any one specific concentration. And then at some point, something will happen as you keep that military under pressure, like we saw in Ulchadatina. It wasn't a stunning Russian maneuver that caused the opening that they then exploited for their attack. It was a miscommunication, a bad one, right? But in 3 years of war, statistically, you're going to have one miscommunication that's really, really bad like that, right? And that's what they had. A Ukrainian unit withdrew. Their relief unit never arrived in the same positions. The trade-off never happened. And Russia poured into that gap in the lines. And then, per Soviet doctrine, threw all of their reinforcements and reserves into that gap. But the thing to remember is that, once it's contained, they have to go back to that sort of push everywhere along the front strategy, which is not very personnel efficient, and it's not very efficient, full stop. And as you can see here, right? This in the grand scheme of things, it didn't really make that much of a difference. When we look at the statistics, right, as of the end of April, that's 6 days ago, right, when most of this, we'll take a look here at the last day in April, right? So here's April 30th. So you can see that from April 30th to now, right, there's a little bit of a build out, but more or less things look like they do now. The total change in terms of how much of Ukraine Russia occupies was 1/100th of a percent. That's 1% of 1%. That's the change that Russia was able to enact. When visually done, with the top being 100% of Ukraine, here's the bottom, and here's everything that was Russia occupied before February 2022, and here's, you could see the apex of the Russian advance, 25% of the country. Then they got pushed out, and now there has been almost no detectable change. So a reminder that, this fighting, it's very dynamic. It obviously is very attritional. And as Russia likely assesses, if they can break the Ukrainian military, they are more likely to be able to kind of stage, like the idea is that you break the Ukrainian military and then you sweep through the country. That's kind of what they're going for, right? It's a little bit like a dam. You're not going to break a dam with attrition. You're not going to slowly flood the town below the dam. No, it's going to break and you're going to flood the whole town. So that's kind of how this attritional thinking works. But if you're interested in seeing how Ukraine ran this defensive effort to stop Russia in Ultratina, I can't show you here. Those videos appear on combatvetnews.com. Combatvetnews.com is my site. It is for members only. I drop videos there twice a week profiling the most up-to-date combat footage. And it's where we see the tactics that these forces are using up close. We do the analysis. It's an invaluable resource. I talk all the time about the way you can see the Ukrainian need for munitions, the Ukrainians' evolving drone strategy, the awful conditions that many of these Russian Storm Z and Storm V units assault under. And if you want to support what I do, because obviously YouTube demonetizes a lot of my videos, basically anything with a uniform and a gun, they demonetize. I suspect that YouTube deems me a small creator. And so they worry about me, peddling conspiracies or something like that. And so they strictly demonetize videos, even ones that a major news outlet would be allowed to show. It's pretty frustrating. That's why I depend on you guys, the members, to help keep me in the business, so to speak. Any one of these tiers is going to get you access to that exclusive video archive and the twice a week updates. So thanks again to all the members, combatvetnews.com. Now let's talk about the other big story, which is Russia preparing for a major offensive and the opening of a new front. Allegedly, Russia is purportedly preparing and forming a northern group of forces from the Leningrad military district to operate in the Belgorod-Kharkiv direction. This includes members of the elite 67th VDV Airborne Division sent to Kursk, and that Russia is gathering almost 50,000 people, right? 10,000 in Kursk, 31,000 in Belgorod, 8,000 in Bryansk. And this looks like a new front, an invasion force, re-invasion force, I guess. And it is a huge undertaking. The problem is, of course, unlike the Russian invasion, we all know it's coming, right? Now, I want to look at the map here, and you can see here is Kharkiv, here's Belgorod, right? Kursk is up here. Bryansk is right here. So Bryansk, Kursk, Belgorod. So you could see that to me infers that this is about, the rumor is that it's about taking Kharkiv. And I think we're probably going to see Russia try to drive into Kharkiv. You could see there's only a couple of routes that they can really do so at scale. One is this north-south route here. One is through Voron. And I think actually based on kind of the operation of the Freedom of Russia Legion, I think you're highly likely to see Russia try to push into these two directions, right? Because you could see this is really rough terrain. It's very unforgiving for Russian forces. And so they're not going to want to fight in it. They're going to want to fight on roadways. The question, of course, is can they even do it? And that's a pretty big question. But I think their idea is that if they can drive into Kharkiv, into the urban areas of Kharkiv, once they're in Kharkiv, they can fight it like the Battle of Bakhmut and win this highly attritional block-by-block fight. I think it's too ambitious. In Bakhmut, you've got to remember that as a precondition to them taking Bakhmut center, they had to occupy the flanks, right? Remember, before taking Bakhmut, you saw the Wagner group take Soledar and Blahodatne. You also saw them occupy Klachivka and Drivka up to this region here. So Bakhmut was encircled, and then Russia began its attritional fight. Similar thing happened in Avdiivka, right? Russia had the encirclement virtually complete, or partially complete, I should say, and then it began its attritional fight in the center. So it would have to encircle Kharkiv, and Kharkiv is not Bakhmut, it's not Avdiivka. You could see it is a massive urban area. It is a capital, and in order to take this, Russia would likely need probably more than 50,000 troops. Remember, they killed or wounded 50,000 in Avdiivka alone. And Avdiivka, like here, I want you guys to scale this. Just look at the number of buildings, the number of urban areas, right? And it's a true city with multiple districts, so train station, lakes and reservoirs, right? Now let's compare this to Avdiivka, where Russia, man, they strained their arm. I can't say it on YouTube, but helping themselves out, patting themselves on the back, we'll say, of how great a job they did taking Avdiivka. And you could see Avdiivka is not even the size of a single district in Kharkiv, right? Kharkiv, this whole screen would have been blotted out with interlocking city blocks and high-rise construction buildings. And Avdiivka is at its widest, maybe 1,200 meters. So, again, is this going to be the Russian stunning advance? No, probably not. But it remains to be seen. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Thank you so much to the Colonel tier members of CombatVetNews.com. Thanks so much to our Lieutenant tier members. And thanks so much to all the members of CombatVetNews.com. New video drops tomorrow. See you in the next one. Cheers.